Hey guys, what's going on? Needs more drums back in City Skylines 2 with another quick little tip about how to build a better city. And today we're going to talk about zoning. So if you look here, I quickly just drew down some of these residential zones by just using the fill tool. And you can see that they all grew kind of differently. So we have some different size lots here. We have some different orientations. The buildings are facing different ways. And, you know, it doesn't look terrible, but I think we could do better. And in order to do better, there's a few tips that I've found that you can use in vanilla without mods. And all it takes is a little bit of patience. So you can get something more similar to this, where all of the buildings are pretty much even, evenly spaced. The lot sizes are pretty similar. And I think that just this looks really, really clean and planned out if that's kind of the look that you're going for. So to demonstrate that, we're going to do a couple of things. So if we jump over here, the first thing that we're going to do is figure out how to make a really good grid. And of course, yes, you could just use the grid tool, but to be honest, I don't really like that tool. I never use it. I like making my own grid because I know that I have control over the sizes of the of each grid, and I think it just is a little bit better for me personally. So you'll notice down here in the snapping tools that I actually have the right three deselected. So I've not selected snap to zoning grid, snap to guidelines, or snap to sides of a building. And what that's going to allow me to do is line up to each of these tiles here along this main road. And you can see that as I drag my cursor, I'm moving one tile at a time. And the same goes if I click and then drag the road, I'm going to move one tile at a time, up and out this way. So one thing that I find really useful when you're making your grids is to know how many units. You see there's these two circles in my cursor. And so from the inner circle to the outer circle, it is 6 units. And you can see that if I just line this up right here with the edge of those tiles, you can count 6 tiles on the left there. And so I know that if I want to make, for example, an 8x8 grid, I just have to drag this out where my ring on the right here is 2 tiles away from that avenue. You can see right there. So this is going to give me an 8 length road. And then if I go up 2 more tiles there and then bring this around here, you can see that now, well, I guess now my grid is 8x8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And so now you can see that I have this nice even grid here with all of the tiles filled in the middle. So what I can do now is grab any residential zone. We're going to use the low density UK detached housing to go with the theme of the city. And so this is where it just requires a little bit of patience, but I promise you'll like the end result. So if you just drag each zone out individually, like so, and leave spaces between. So here you can see that I want 2x4 lots, so I'm zoning that accordingly. And of course, these are not developing right now because our demand is dropping a bit. But my point stands. You can pick the size of the lots that you want by just taking a second to drag these out individually. And as these fill in, you can grab your fill tool and just click in between the gaps. And I'm not going to do that here because then if I were to do this, for example, now I could potentially get, a building that's 6 units deep, or I can get something that's like 3 units wide. So I'm actually just going to keep that gap right in the middle there because these are the lots that I want. And then I kind of do this around my cities. I'll zone out some of the buildings and then come back and check over time as they develop and then just fill in the gaps using the fill tool. And it's a pretty quick way to get everything looking very, very nice and even. So once you've done that, you still might have some weird kind of gaps in your grid that you don't really know what to deal with. And so this is where pathways come in. So I figured that I learned about this from some other content creators kind of in the early days of City Skylines 2. And since we still don't have any kind of vanilla tool to change what roads actually have zoning on them, this is kind of the best way to handle some of those awkward spaces if we want to choose exactly which roads have zoning. So for example, let's just say that I don't want zoning along this road here. Let's say maybe I want to make this like a little park and I just want to get rid of the zoning along this road. So what I could do is if I drag out a pathway, just say kind of like around this, it'll kind of get rid of the zoning, around this area. And I can even go as far as to just drag it pretty much right up against the road, and it'll completely get rid of that zoning there. So now I have all of the zoning on this road going here instead of on this road going along the coast. And typically, like, what I like to use this for is, like a situation kind of like this, or maybe a lot, maybe more like this over here, where I don't like how deep these are cutting into this zoning grid here. Like this lot, for example, is cutting really deep into this grid, and I'd rather just zone some buildings in these tiles here that kind of extend out to here. So what I could do here is simply just drag out a pathway, and now I have a nice deep zone there for these tiles instead of, you know, these cutting into that. And then these are all even too, so it doesn't really look too bad. And, you know, of course, like over time I can drag this pathway out kind of past here. We can make like a little trail or something. And, you know, you can use these pathways in really, really cool ways. And another reason that I like to use these pathways is I could kind of manually affect the orientation of my grid without using kind of any kind of road. So like, for example, let's say I want to zone some commercial along this avenue, and then I want to zone some residential along this road back here. Well, what I could do is drag a pathway like this, and now my commercial zones will hopefully face the front. They might face these roads, but hopefully face the front, and then my residential zones can face back here. And so that's just a really good way to kind of get everything oriented properly and take advantage of the pathways. And not to mention, they look good. You know, they look realistic. You'll notice, like in a lot of cities, you know, there are a lot of pathways and pedestrian access points, you know, in between buildings and stuff. So it gives you a nice way to kind of divide up your zoning grid in a very, very creative way, and it can be functional as well. So that's pretty much it. Nothing crazy here, but just a couple of little tips that I like to use to get everything laid out a little more evenly. And I think the end product always looks really, really nice when you take just a couple of extra steps and are a bit patient with your zoning. So if you found this helpful, please leave a like or a comment. And if you didn't find this helpful, leave a comment for that as well. Happy to hear your guys' thoughts. But in the meantime, thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope that you all have a great rest of your week. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace out.